I think we mentioned in passing last week or the week before, we did a brief drive-by of Apple Intelligence, and the feedback was like, love to hear you boys going in on Apple Intelligence.
Yeah, the Discord was lighting up. They've been waiting for us to unleash the beast, so to speak.
But there's a lot of things that have been happening Apple. There's rumors, there's they just did their earnings.
We're always talking about Apple, and that's not unusual given they are, depending on the day, the world's largest and most valuable company.
Yes.
They are a technology company, so they're going to pop up. And also we use Mac and Apple products in our daily lives.
We do.
There's lots of touch points, which is why Apple comes up a fair bit. But it has actually been a while since we've given a sort of holistic picture on where they're at. Because honestly, if you were feeling like being critical, which we occasionally are, you could look at Apple's current state and think they're in their most vulnerable position they've been in a very long time.
Yes.
Sometimes it's overegged, overcooked.
Yeah.
Keeping in mind this is a company that has like $170 billion of cash dry powder just sitting there.
Yeah.
So if they stopped selling iPhones, just completely nobody bought any of their products again, they could sustain themselves as an enterprise for quite a while. Like they take out all their R&D spending and just sustenance level for their services.
Like, let's keep everyone employed. Keep the services ticking along.
They would sustain for years. They're certainly not on the verge of collapse, but they are in like a vulnerable position.
Yeah, and look, I want to be careful here because they're in a vulnerable position, asterisk, and we'll get into like where they're obviously not in a vulnerable position.
Yep.
Spoiler alert, A, their chips, B, the fact that everyone has an iPhone, both put them in a relative position of strength compared to almost every other company on the planet.
Yeah. Hear about the iPad, a company, a product that we've often talked about as being under-respected and sort of a laggard among the rest of their devices. As a business unit alone, is larger than most companies on Earth.
Yes. Yeah. Larger than all but I'd say around like a handful.
Yeah. So this is a company that's doing fine. But
it's a good time to talk about Apple.
Yeah.
I think the best place to start is, let's start with their earnings. So the big headlines from the earnings were, well, as usual though.
And this was this week.
Yeah. So this is hot off the press. Not that we're the first to report on Apple's earnings. Would you believe that there's a number of folks?
This is our Watergate. We went onto apple.com/investor and found a PDF that will shock you.
It's like we read a P&L. Revenue's up.
Love it.
Profit is up.
Love it.
However, the interesting factor is that iPhone sales are down. They're down on last year. iPhone sales are down. That's largely driven by China. They're down massively in China. But iPhone sales being down. So it's like, well, where did they make their money? It wasn't Macs. It wasn't Mac Pros. It wasn't iPads. For that matter. iPads have been declining in their sales. Or wearables. It was services. And if you are down round head from day dot, we've been talking about Apple are a services. Well, actually, the last time we talked about Apple, I think, was basically to say, like, maybe that was the point where you stick a fork in the road and say Apple is no longer a devices company, and you could potentially call them a services company.
Yep. It's worth just pointing out why they made that pivot, and we've talked about it in the past, but just to, like, underscore it, they were obviously a very, very valuable company. The iPod sort of rescued them from the doldrums and turned them into, after the first iPod came out, they became sort of the seeds of the company that we know now. But the iPhone was the thing that absolutely turbocharged them and led them through unprecedented growth for over a decade, basically. But they got to the point where you get to a level, and it naturally happens, where when you become so dominant within a space in a lot of markets, it's very hard for them to increase their penetration in the United States, for example. Yeah. They're going to hit a threshold where everyone that's ever going to buy one has one.
Yeah, so they're just hoping for upgrades, which is obviously not growth.
There's no and you can't, upgrades are hard to predict. There are some people who are going to buy one every year. There's some percentage of people who are going to wait a few years. And as they get more and more powerful, bigger and bigger chips with not a whole lot of other features going on, as we've talked about in the past, the average time between upgrades extends and extends and extends.
When you talk about growth, what that meant in iPhone sales is they need to sell more iPhones next year than they did this year.
And that's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen if you have saturation. And obviously they, it's the iPhone. Like they still are expanding to new markets and obviously,
Yeah.
blah blah blah. But for the at the moment, the fact is like we have basically reached peak iPhone.
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
last year. Like
yeah, they reached peak iPhone. Yeah. And literally their only hope for expanding iPhone growth is just like hoping that certain developing markets get wealthier, which is something they can't really help.
Yeah.
It'd be great if they can get to a position where they can start opening 10 Apple stores in Lagos, but there are exogenous factors in that calculation that Tim Cook has no influence over.
Yes, yeah, in Mauritania.
Yeah, exactly. So, and what are services but, well, two things. One, keeping people locked into the ecosystem.
Services is all of the money they make not selling hardware,
Yeah,
basically.
and it is wringing extra money from people who are already have the devices.
So, like, they take the 30% of the App Store as a classic. That's services revenue. Obviously, the classic, we've probably said it 10 times on Down Round. Literally, and he did it again, Tim Cook, our services revenue has increased dramatically. Apple TV, Severance, like, again, he goes, services like Apple TV, Apple TV Plus. That is not what the service, that is services revenue.
Yep. And
Apple Music is services revenue, but as we've said 9 billion times, the vast majority of Apple services revenue is the money that Google gives them to be the default search engine and
clipping the ticket on App Store.
30% of every single purchase that goes through the App Store, which the majority of it is gems in games.
Yeah, exactly. Buying in-app purchases in weird little Candy Crush games. Obviously, they're super happy about, they've been chipping away at the Apple TV thing for a while. Severance is like an actual bona fide hit, and they've been really, really talking it up recently. The second season just came out. They did like a promo advertisement that had Tim Cook in it, which should be evidence that they actually consider it like a strategic win as a company at the top, at the highest level. But I mean, and this also signals a bit of the weird Apple precarity, is that something that we've been talking about in Down Round for a couple of years at this point. They clearly know that like the Apple tax on apps and gems and whatever through the App Store is a vulnerable position. There's the regulatory vulnerability, like the EU busting open the iPhone for third-party app stores.
Yeah.
There's companies like Epic Games that are suing them. Developers hate them for it. They obviously know this golden goose is like relatively vulnerable, and someday in the future we will have to like reduce that cut potentially.
Yeah. And well, my opinion on this has always been, what annoys me about Apple is that they're not proactive in that though.
Yeah.
It's like they can see that at a certain point, and they've obviously done the game theory, they've gamed it out, but they can see that at a certain point, the 30% is vulnerable. They have kind of acquiesced once where they reduced it to 15% if you own less than $1 million on your first thing owned, made like you pay less until you hit some threshold, then you start paying 30. They have acquiesced a tiny bit, but if they were more proactive, we wouldn't have to wait for the EU to put down regulations that, I'm going to be frank, for the most part, they're in good spirit, what the EU is trying to do.
Sure.
However, bloody bureaucrats from Brussels, I don't trust to make product management decisions.
No, those Eurocrats, they got no fucking clue.
So I would rather that Apple were a little bit more proactive when they saw the pressure coming and potentially cut it off at the pass rather than wait for regulation to be forced on them and then having to deal with it and trying to like skirt around it as best they can and creating like weirdness. But regardless, we're kind of off-piste here.
No, not really. I think we're very much aligned. And you can see them introducing new non-app related services. I talked about Severance. They're talking about that hard and pushing up Apple TV as a real streaming service. Plus, their most recent feature announcement, they added like not as part of a keynote, which is weird for Apple. They introduced the iCloud events platform, which came out this week. I don't know if you had a chance to play around with it.
I haven't played around with it, and I know people are shitting on it, but I actually don't think this is the worst thing.
No, I think it's okay. And, this is something that I think we've talked about in the podcast before. Event planning is like one of those concepts where it's so clear that everyone wants it.
Yeah.
Everyone wants a unified event platform where they can organize sick house parties.
Yeah, and we had it on Facebook back in the day.
We had it for one brief, beautiful moment. We actually had a platform where you had all your friends with their real names in one place.
Yeah.
And if you invited them all on this one platform, you knew there was like a 90% chance all of them would see it.
Because you could say yes, no, or maybe, right? And it was like, it was fairly accurate.
Yep.
The expectation was that you would answer accurately.
You would. People get pissed off if you didn't say something.
But then, unfortunately, our parents joined Facebook.
Yeah, and ruined it.
And ruined the entire platform.
And ruined it.
So we no longer have a unified events platform.
And we've never had it again. And because, Instagram, it's not going to work for because people have weird names on there. You can have a random name on Instagram. You can choose anything for your username, anything for your display name. Whereas Facebook used to like really militantly enforce you must have your real name.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, part of it's the culture. Like, I don't think a platform can get away with that now. Like a new platform launching a social media network that says you must use your real name.
Yeah, and
would not
give
work.
me an ID. Yeah.
It would not work. Facebook had it for a bit. If someone invited me to a Facebook event now, there's a high chance I wouldn't see it.
There's no chance I'd see it.
No. And
I'm not even logged in.
It only worked because like the social graph already existed. I'm pretty sure Facebook events was built as like a hackathon thing. And then they realized, people actually love this shit.
Yeah.
All the data was already there. We didn't have to collect anything new. Everyone had already plugged all their stuff in. Whereas there's a whole bunch of like Zoomer party apps like Partiful.
Yeah, yeah.
But again, it involves, the moment...
Everyone has to download a new app.
Anytime it involves going to a new app or a website you're not familiar with, dead in the water.
Hence why, like, for the 35 pluses or the 30 pluses, paperless posts.
Paperless posts? See, that's
but that costs so much money.
Because, yeah.
I did a paperless post the other day for a small group, 20 odd people. It was like $75.
We did it for our wedding, paperless post.
Must have cost hundreds for a wedding.
Probably did. I can't remember. But you're so caught up at the moment. And the thing that makes it, again, made Facebook hard is the moment you have to like supply. The beauty of Facebook events, and this is something that you cannot replicate, is that you would go through your Facebook list and you'd be like, there's a guy that I met once at the pub randomly at uni. I added them to Facebook. I've never spoken to them, but I wouldn't mind if they came to this party.
Yeah.
Just to flesh out the crowd.
Yeah.
I'll invite him and then maybe it'll come.
Yeah, yeah.
There's literally no way to do that.
No.
Anymore. It's just not possible.
No. You're right. It was a golden age. And at the time, we didn't realize. This is the thing with golden ages. We're probably in one now. We don't know what it is. Like when we were pirating things, we were all,
golden age.
Golden age. At the time, we were just mad.
In Renaissance Venice, they didn't know what was going on. They were like, this is normal. The height of the Roman Empire.
They're like, this is shit.
This kind of sucks.
Anyway, yes.
Anyway, but
Apple's released an events,
and again, they probably are among companies as good as it gets for maybe having that social graph. But even them, like, I don't know, I'm not going to use it to organize an event. Again, you need people. You're still going to need people's emails or their phone number.
Yeah, I mean, how many events are we organising?
I mean, let me be clear. I want to be clear. The march of time is part of this. I don't get invited to house parties nearly as much anymore. So I fully get that. If we have any 19-year-old Downies, first of all, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Go out to
But also, shout outs to you. Like, give us a comment somewhere.
Yeah, let us know. If you're a 19-year-old Downie, let us know.
Yeah, let us know.
Drop it in the comments.
I mean, we have dinner parties and whatnot. And then you have the more formal occasions. Yeah, like, I'm actually going to 3 weddings this year.
Yeah, nice.
I'm still young. I'm going to weddings.
Yeah, I'm going to weddings this year. I think we're probably going to one of the same weddings this year.
Well, there you go.
Anyway.
Regardless, yeah, they've released that.
They've released that. Oh, yeah, whatever. But it certainly shows.
Again, I don't mind, as I said, people are shitting on it, being like, who would use this? And yes, it's true. It's like, I wouldn't actually use it myself because also I have friends who use Android, for one.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But, in America where Australia, obviously, we're pretty high percentage iPhone, but...
Yeah, if it's going to work anywhere, it should work here.
It should work here.
But the fact of the matter that they're sort of releasing this stuff and they're doing it off their regular cadence suggests that they consider people signing up to iCloud Plus, because you need iCloud Plus to make the event. You don't need it to RSVP to it. That it's something that they're focused on.
It's pushing people to services revenue.
They want people on there. Anyway, we've stayed on services revenue for a bit.
Let's very quickly touch, because we were talking about iPhone sales being down. Before we move on, big part of that being China. It's down 11%. China is a weird one, though, because when the original chip ban went in place into China, all of their Android phones all of a sudden were dog shit. All the Huawei's were shithouse. And so they saw Apple saw a bunch of people moving over to iPhones. Subsequent to that, Huawei now has the 7-nanometer SMIC processor, which is pretty good. It's nowhere near iPhone. Like,
It's good. It's good enough. Yeah.
but it's good enough. And the Huawei's are pretty sick. We've talked about them before. They're like, what is it called? Like the quad fold or something. The fold is the wrong number.
Yeah.
It's like the 4-fold is the 3-fold.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
They're pretty good. So Huawei is taking market share in China.
It's chewing into their market share.
And I will say, so Tim Cook basically said with regards to iPhone sales being down, he was like, it was down in markets where we haven't released Apple Intelligence. Hence why it's down. Like, for example, China. Sorry, mate.
I'm not
buying it.
I'm not buying that. Apple's relationship with China is unbelievably complicated. Let's be clear. They make their phones there. They've been trying to shift production to India and Vietnam, but that is like, that's a 15-year project.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not something you can do overnight. And like, again, it comes back to like, and we're going to get a bit political, folks. All the tariffs and shit like that in the US and trying to reshore back to production back to the US. This isn't the 1990s. It's not just labor arbitrage why things get built in China. Because we've been building stuff because it's cheap for 30 years in China.
Yeah.
They're really fucking good at it.
Yeah, they're the only ones who make the screws. And the screws, by the way, are down the road.
There are whole cities with more population than any city in Australia where the only thing they do is make microwaves. Like, they are cooking over there when it comes to manufacturing.
Yeah.
So Apple, it was their dream growth market. They were like, developing nation that has a growing middle class who are getting
miraculous growth in the middle class, some would say.
Some would say. Thank you to Deng Xiaoping. Anyway, we're talking about potentially 1 billion new Apple customers. Plus, we build our stuff there. And now they are like, global trade environment's getting a bit shaky. We might need to diversify our manufacturing. Chinese customers have other options. And, and Apple may not have kind of like the luster about it in terms of like, as a completely aspirational brand. There's a whole bunch of people who would be more than happy to have like a native built Huawei phone or whatever. That's a pretty existential thing for Apple to be wrangling with, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, losing the Chinese market would not be good, folks.
No.
And to be frank, like basically everyone in the world, not me. I mean, there are people on both sides of the aisle and people who are ostensibly left wing and libs who are like, Apple shouldn't be making their phones in China, which, as we discussed, like it is not that simple. And I think I've mentioned on Darren before, I remember reading a report about when Apple first tried to move some of their production to India, and it was around they were literally, the first thing they moved, I believe, was like the casing around the phone. It was like the metal kind of casing around the phone. With Foxconn, who produces most of the Apple stuff, the expected yields are 99.999%. And they moved this casing to India, and the first batch had a yield of 50%.
Yeah, right?
So and this is just they were like, this is kind of one of the simplest pieces. This is the metal casing around it. We're not talking about microprocessors here or anything.
No.
So in that, and my understanding is it's actually got a lot better in India, but there's a lot of ground to make up. There's generations of understanding.
It's literally generations of expertise that have been built up since the Chinese markets opened up and they became the world's manufacturer, which,
it's not a lift and shift here, folks.
No, America has lost that capacity and would need to be built up again if they brought manufacturing back, which Apple found as well when they tried to build like the Mac Pro.
The Mac Pro, yeah.
It's like, it turns out that you actually need to be doing this regularly and have that depth of supply chains. That's the other thing, like building depth to your supply chains, where it's like, I know that we can get the components for X one city over, like this fully internal Chinese supply chains for manufacturing.
When you're dealing with the complexity of something that has, 1,000 different parts from various different suppliers, it's not easy.
No, it's not easy. As you said, Apple Intelligence. Tim Cook alleges that is the driving force. I mean, he didn't explicitly say it, but it was implied. Because China doesn't have Apple Intelligence, of course it wasn't sticky, because that's our retention play.
Exactly. Like it's markets where Apple Intelligence is live that we're still doing well with iPhones. Ignoring Europe, which Europe actually sold better than America, and America has Apple Intelligence and Europe doesn't, other than the UK or whatever, blah, 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 because EU, etc. So like it was real pulling a straw.
I was desperate.
Something. He's throwing something out there.
You wouldn't say it to your boss.
But yeah, but basically the line was, yes, the markets that don't have Apple Intelligence, they're not buying iPhones.
Of course they're struggling. We invented AI.
Now, we said this the other week. We did a whole Apple Intelligence episode when it first dropped in Australia. So sorry to our American listeners, I was a little bit behind. We were going through them. But I think that now we've lived with them for a bit. This could be a pretty quick segment, to be frank. I think we should go through them and then say whether they're a big dub or they're busted.
Please.
Okay, notification summaries.
Busted.
I don't find them useful. I can't trust them.
No, they're completely... Actually, you know what? I have an example from today to illustrate this. My wife sent me a string of messages. I'm not even going to tell you what the messages were about, just to inform you that this summary was not super instructive. The summary of 7 messages was something, quote, freaky but not offensive, unquote, costs $2,000 for 20 minutes.
It's intriguing.
It's certainly intriguing. And it caught my eye. And upon opening the thread, it was revealed that it was not particularly instructive about what the message was about.
I find them typically confusing.
Yeah.
And it does, like, I guess from like an engagement perspective, I'm like, what the hell? What's this? Is it? And because sometimes I get panicked as well because the way it's framed. Unable to complete task.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And it's like, what? And it's just someone being like, oh, yeah, don't know if we can do that. Maybe we should do something else. And it's like, oh, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, it has no way, especially when you get over a couple of messages that's trying to summarize, it just completely loses the plot.
It turns out it's really hard to summarize even 500 characters down into 25.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously they're using an incredibly lean, small LLM to do those summaries.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times it's just like, I have no idea. I just brings it together. Apparently they've also like taken their foot off the accelerator with some manifestations of it because
the BBC obviously sued them for like having incorrect headlines saying was it Luigi killed himself?
That's right. Luigi Mangione killed himself. That's a pretty big L.
So in the beta apparently they've actually turned off that feature. So regardless of whether you, and I know some people say that, I find it a little bit useful. It's regardless of, the facts are fact, they're turning it off in the beta.
Busted.
That's busted. I mean, image gen, we've already touched on this.
It's not that good. It does seem like to be... It's a huge part of their current ad campaign. They're running a lot of Genmoji ads. Just a few around Sydney. There's a few billboards of generate your own emoji. I used it briefly to try to like trick it into making rude pictures, which I did with some success. So that was funny. I
had the same issue as someone in our Discord where I'm unable to make it do anything other than use photos. Like, I don't know if I'm just boomer, but...
No, if you do anything that it can interpret as, like, has a person in it, it will use you. Like, what it has as you in a photo. I will say that, like, the little Genmoji representation of me is quite accurate.
Oh, yeah, the Genmojis are quite accurate. Yeah.
Like, that tickles me.
But, like, let's be frank. I mean, I'm in middle age. I'm just going to go out there and say it. I'm basically middle age. I'm middle aged.
You're a middle aged man.
I'm a middle aged man.
I'm a bit younger than you, so I'm still in the prime of life.
Yeah, you're still a young adult.
Yeah,
I'm middle aged, and I opened it once. I'm not trying to make fucking emojis. Let's be frank.
That's not good. Yeah, so
busted.
So use like the writing tools, trying to make your writing more professional.
Well, I've never used
it. No,
we said this at the time though. Like in the context of a phone. Maybe if you're English second language or whatever, okay, that might be handy. But otherwise, busted. Auto replies, I will say I do use them.
Okay, I've never used one.
Like hitting the like suggested reply, I'll be like, oh yeah, I'll hit that. However, this is hardly innovation, right? Like Gmail.
Gmail's had that for years. Yeah.
For years and years and years.
I've never used it. So well, we can't even talk about the advanced Siri because...
Oh, no, but I will say Siri's worse.
Yes.
Siri is worse.
But I do accept that they haven't released the full version or whatever.
Yeah.
Where they want it to be.
Okay, sure. But Siri has gotten worse since Apple Intelligence because I think they're sending it off. I use Siri a lot in my car.
Yep.
Because obviously I don't want to break the rules of the road. And so, for example, I'm asking for music. That's a classic thing. If I'm in my car, I use Siri to ask for music.
Yep.
I ask for a song. It used to be pretty good. Slow.
Yep.
Took too long.
Yep.
But it would work fine. Now, regularly, I'll ask for a song. It'll show the fucking I used to like it aesthetically. Apple Intelligence kind of rainbow frame thing. But now I hate it because of my association in that I'll ask for a song. The songs that I've been asking for forever, Charlie XCX, Apple, for example.
Tune.
Something like that.
Tune.
Or Guess, if I'm feeling a little, raunchy.
Frequently you are, yeah.
In the past, it's had no problem with that. Like something like asking for a popular song.
Yep.
But now regularly I'll ask for it. It'll Apple Intelligence, give me the frame, and then just the Apple Intelligence will go away and nothing will happen.
Yep.
It must have gone to an LLM to ask the LLM, should I interpret this as, a Siri command? And it's like, only 50% sure, no. And so it just won't work. Very regularly, it just won't work now. It'll think about it and then not work.
Yep.
Which is fucking annoying. It's worse. It's literally worse than it was.
Yep.
I know I can ask it more questions now, theoretically.
Yeah.
But because it's so poor in responding, I don't.
Yep.
Like, I don't know what the capabilities are. I've tried it. I've asked it more general questions. Now, instead of saying, here's a link to Wikipedia, it'll, tell you the answer. Sometimes. For me, it's worse. Siri is worse.
Yep. I never use Siri. I'm still one of the people who the only use I have for it is the one where it is the path of least resistance, which is setting a timer. Set a timer for 20 minutes. Is it easier than going into the timer menu, dragging that fucking spinning wheel? It's easy for that, and I use it for that.
Well, I'm a relatively heavy Siri user, I suppose, because also I got smart home stuff.
Yeah.
And it's my life has gotten worse.
Wow.
With Apple Intelligence.
Thanks, Tim. So that's busted. I can't speak from a place of authority, but I'm going to say busted on your behalf.
So another feature I have used, especially when it first came out, I was using it a bunch, is double tap at the very bottom of your screen to open Type to Siri.
Yeah, again, you've lost me. I've never done it.
I did start doing it. So basically what it is it's like a shortcut to chat to an LLM is the idea. But because, again, Siri will see if it can use its own Siri LLM, and then if it can't, it'll ask OpenAI. It takes so long, and then the answer it gives is so short, and it takes so long. It's basically useless. I may as well just open up OpenAI, like it's in my dock,
which
already.
is what I do. I have my little side button, my iPhone assigned to ChatGPT. I use it all the time. I pop it open to ask.
My side button is my authenticator. Google Authenticator.
See, that's how you know that you're a power user. You're like one of those guys that does posts on Reddit their daily loadout, and it's like their backpack with a pistol in it and shit like that. That's you. Open my authenticator.
Yeah, I have to fucking authenticate all the time.
All right, yeah.
I'm a contractor. I fucking. There's a bunch of things I need to authorize.
It's the sort of thing you say when you're like a CIA wet work guy. I'm a contractor, mate. I got my authenticator locked and fucking loaded. Anyway, so yeah, we'll say busted for that as well.
Absolutely busted.
And there's basically
look how quickly I can open that.
Oh my god!
Look at all those. Look at those codes. Look at that,
and it's ticking down. Oh fucking hell! Anyway, so yeah, let's just clarify. For now, and this is what Apple would be very much aware of. They do not need to be They do not need to be chasing the frontiers of LLMs. There is nothing about what they do that compels them to be the best LLM or the best AI feature provider.
I'm going to disagree with that.
Let me finish my thought, and then you can push back. For them, it's a retention play. It has to be good enough. They don't have to be. For example, they do not need to be, at least for now, this may change in the future, they don't need to be providing the cutting edge of OpenAI's reasoning models. They don't need to be chasing the operator thing, which does all the
that's true.
Or agents or whatever. All they need to do is provide an expected nice experience that people like, and then be a gateway to other companies that focus on that exclusively, to have the iPhone be the platform that people do it on. That's all they need to do. I don't think they're necessarily rising to that challenge, but they're clearly thinking about it as everyone's talking about AI. We need to provide like a baseline experience that's good enough that nothing stops people using iPhones.
Yeah.
There's no customer out there who is like, I can't get an iPhone because I can't do all this cool AI stuff on it.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. I do. I think we're aligned. My point is it's not good enough at the moment. And B, I think that there is a world where it would be better if you're a normie and you're not fucking using ChatGPT every day, but it's handy and you hear people constantly saying, like, it would actually benefit you, but not enough to pay the money. Yeah. If your phone just offered it for you, exactly the same features or on par, sure, it doesn't do the deep research or all of the, as you say, the extra kind of fucking features, but all of the handy features like asking it to write things, that would be a key selling point. Yep. If it's like, you don't have to worry about OpenAI or Claude or any of this other AI shit. Your phone just does it already out of the box. It's simple. It just works. That would be good, a good feature. And it should not be out of the question for the most valuable company in the world to be able to have that integrated.
I agree. They've very clearly fucked it up. Or they missed the ball on, when all the ChatGPT stuff was happening. That's not unexpected. OpenAI had been working on that for years and building it up and what have you. But it's pretty clear that they hired the head of AI at Apple is John Giannandrea. He came from Google. He was considered like an absolute dynamite hire at Apple, running their whole AI enterprise. I think it's pretty clear that he's like not brought it home. And the reporting that came out of Bloomberg recently is that they have introduced, there's like this floating product gun at Apple who basically gets brought in to salvage projects. I can't remember what her name is, but apparently she has been, involved with a lot of like very successful products at Apple. She's been like brought over to AI as being like, fuck, and she's a product person. She's not like a engineering whiz. It's like, turn this into something that's good.
Yeah.
Like I can imagine there's probably cool stuff happening in Apple's AI minds. Like they're probably working on some fun stuff.
Yeah.
But it's just like, take that, put it into something that people actually like because they don't like this stuff.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Now it's probably a good point. Let's cut it. We're going to do the same thing we did the last 2 weeks and do a two-parter because we still need to talk about they abandoned their glasses project or there's rumors about abandoning their glasses project and their chips as well. We'll save that, though, for premium episode because it's not all bad news for Apple, for one. And two, what are they doing in VR, AR? What's the future of that?
What's happening? If you're not subscribed, www.downround.net. Join Down Around Premium. You can join our Discord. It's a lovely space. Lively, wonderful people. But we'll see you in part 2.
If you like grinding, if you're a hustler and a grinder, then why the heck aren't you frickin' Down Round Premium? Go to downround.net right now and level up your game.